From the fatal explosion at the Upper Big Branch coal mine in West Virginia earlier this month to last week's oil rig disaster in the Gulf, life on the job can be dangerous for millions of Americans. The statistics are chilling, but many of these accidents happen without anyone hardly noticing, as our chief investigative correspondent Brian Ross reports. Brian?
Terry, more Americans are killed on their jobs in this country every year than have been killed in the entire 7 years of the war in Iraq. It is a hidden national tragedy. For years, workers at the Tulsa, Oklahoma plant of the country's biggest laundry company, Cintas, performed a very dangerous operation, as seen in company video obtained by ABC News. To dislodge the backup of wet uniforms being fed into the huge tumbling dryers, workers would climb onto the moving conveyor belt and give the pile of clothes a good kick, trying to avoid being pulled in.
It's not like once a week or once a month thing happen. It can happen 3, 4, 5 times a day.
An internal Cintas document shows the company knew of the problem by at least 2004, after a worker fell in an incident that could have resulted in serious injury and possible death. And a former employee who left in 2004 says shutting down the line was frowned upon when he was there.
If you shut down the system, take a while to turn it back on, and that's delay. People sit, don't have a job to do.
Cintas says after that employee left, it trained its workers to shut down the conveyor belt before climbing onto it. And the company says it did not know that the practice continued at the Tulsa plant until the morning of March 7th, 2007.
We have an employee that's been injured in a machine.
What kind of machine? What's going on?
Laundry dryer.
Is something on him?
No, he is in it.
He's in it?
Yes.
That morning, Eleazar Torres was doing what he and others had done again and again at the Cintas laundry without shutting down the conveyor belt. First, Torres tried to clear the jam with his hand and then climbed up onto the conveyor belt, jumping again and again on the pile of clothes. This time, Torres would not get away with it, as he was pulled into the dryer with tons of clothes and temperatures that exceed 300 degrees. The battered body of the 46-year-old worker, a father of 4, was found in a pile of wet clothes.
It was awful. I just thought of the worst horror movie you could see, after they told me what had happened, how long he was in there.
Eleazar Torres was one of 5,488 Americans who was killed on the job that year, an average of 14 a day.
We think America should be doing much better. 14 deaths a day on the job is far too many.
Dr. David Michaels, the newly appointed head of OSHA, the federal agency responsible for workplace safety, says the Obama administration plans a crackdown.
There are a lot of irresponsible employers who don't ensure workers are given safe workplaces to work in.
Under the Bush administration, OSHA was harshly criticized for being soft on enforcement, allowing companies to operate on a kind of honor system, and many got away with underreporting workplace injuries. What was the result then of this Bush-era lack of regulation?
Well, the result was the numbers have fallen like a rock.
So that's a good story.
It's a story. I don't know if it's a good story. It's a story. It's a tale. It's a yarn. Okay? It's not true.
So everyone's happy if these injuries are not reported.
Of course. It's a win-win-win-win, except for the worker.
Companies that report low or zero injury rates do not generally get inspected by OSHA. The sign outside the Salinas, California plant of the Smurfit Stone Paper Company says safety first. But state prosecutors say the drive to keep the injury rates at or close to zero led some officials here to falsify records. Francisco Polito had a finger cut off at the plant, but he says he was discouraged by a company official from filling out an OSHA injury report.
He told me that it was going to be hard on me if it became a lost time accident.
Prosecutors allege that Smurfit Stone Company officials also tried to send injured workers to a physician's assistant at a clinic instead of the hospital to avoid a record of medical treatment.
They carried me down the rest of the stairs and outside, and I'm in extreme pain.
Christopher Arruda says the plant manager refused to call an ambulance when he was injured or take him to the hospital.
I'm telling him to, take me to the emergency room, and he's telling me, it's going to take too much time and all that.
Last month, 2 Smurfit Stone plant managers pleaded guilty to criminal misdemeanor charges of concealing events that affected the injured workers' benefits. Prosecutors said part of the motivation was a bonus program for managers and workers if injuries were kept to a minimum or zero.
That kind of intimidated employees from reporting that they actually got hurt at work, so they would say they got hurt at home.
At the Department of Labor, the new head of OSHA says all of that will soon change.
Brian, since the Obama administration began, we've hired more than 100 additional inspectors. Our rate of inspections is going way up. We're finding much more serious hazards, and we're issuing more citations.
As a general rule, employers do not cheat.
Baruch Felder, a former representative of the National Association of Manufacturers, says there's no evidence companies are systematically cheating on injury reports.
I think they haven't found it up to this particular point, and I think that the notion that they're going to find an industry-wide attempt to hide the ball is going to be flawed.
They shouldn't look? Shouldn't spend the money to look?
I think they ought to spend the money to find people falling off roofs who aren't wearing their lanyards and their safety belts.
I think the last administration was very comfortable with this idea that injury rates were slowly going down, but they didn't want to pick up the rock and look underneath it. I think what's going on here is there's an epidemic of programs that discourage workers from reporting injuries.
In the case of the Cintas laundry plant in Tulsa, it was only after the worker was killed in the dryer that OSHA moved in and cited the company for 42 safety violations and levied a fine of almost $2.8 million. The new head of OSHA says that's the kind of crackdown we should expect to see more often.